I have fully accepted that this is a problem.
Yeah.
I generally clean my room about once a week, but in between I let it get absolutely absurdly messy. So what's going on today? Well, today I wanted to set some time aside to be able to work on something. Something that I've actually had the idea for quite a while, and I've written stuff down like in the notes on my phone. But especially with the daily vlog, I've never really had the time to sit down and really hash it all out. See, earlier this year I discovered a comedy show on Facebook Watch. It's a show called Real Bros of Simi Valley. It's actually really unique and funny, and it's on a really crappy streaming platform, but the concept and creative talent behind it is really enjoyable. It's one of those shows where the characters are just absurd caricatures of certain like stereotypes or funny people in real life, but the reason they're so funny is because you know there are people out there who are almost exactly like that. Especially since it's set in California, it's no stretch of the imagination to imagine there's some crazy people that act exactly like this out there. That's not a bash on, well, it is kind of a bash on Californians. Anyway, the series is set up pretty simply. It's just a sitcom in kind of the style of The Office, where it's very self-aware and they're filming a documentary, but a lot of the plot and just base of the series is simple enough that it allows the comedy and the creative writing to really shine through. So I thought that this would be a perfect series to write kind of a, well, like a mock episode for, to kind of flex my screenwriting. See, I've never really written a script before, at least not formally. I mean, I've written down a bunch of ideas like, well, where's my phone? I've got an entire Apple Notes thing on my phone for tons of ideas, and I've lied in bed at night thinking about them and envisioning certain shots, but I've never really put it down on paper or computerized paper. So that's what I wanted to set today aside for. Because while YouTube is great, if I want to start moving more into film, I know I gotta start writing my own stuff. And while I'm not starting from scratch because these characters aren't my own, I thought it would be a great, I don't know, stepping stone from not writing anything to at least getting dialogue and script formatting down. So I'm gonna get to work on writing, and I'll check in with you guys in probably about an hour or so. This is what I've got. 2 lousy pages. This whole process has been kind of interesting. For one, it's a lot more difficult to write with somebody else's character than I thought it would be. The thing is, if you create the character, you can make the character do anything you want them to do. If you have a set character and they already have a personality, they have interests, you need to get into the mind of that character instead of just inventing the character. So while I didn't have to go through and make my own characters, which is a very difficult thing to do, I'm not complaining about that. It's important when you're writing dialogue or situations that you're writing a dialogue or a situation that that character would actually say or would find themselves in. You can't just rewrite a character to fit the narrative arc of the story. I think so far that's been the most difficult part of writing this script. And maybe the formatting. See, going into this, I knew that there was a certain way that scripts are written, whether it be font or just general layout. Those things were going to be rules that I had to follow when typing out a script in professional or standard form. What I didn't know was how completely different this form was than anything else I'd ever written. In school, I was used to writing essays, etc. with the essay format. And even if you're doing creative writing like a storybook, the way that you write dialogue is different than the way you write dialogue in a script. And not only that, but with a script you need to make sure that you include descriptions of the scenery, characters' general attitudes, the way that they're interacting with that scenery, and even the complexion that you want those actors to have in their voice, whether they're excited or scared or mean or concerned. All that stuff needs to be put into a script to really drive your point across. The simplest way to put it is when writing a script as opposed to an essay or creative writing, you can't put "he exclaimed" or "he said excitedly." Like there's no place for that in the format, so you need to put it in a different layout, which was quite a bit to learn, and I'm definitely still learning it. That being said, it's only been an hour, so I guess we'll see in the next couple hours if it starts to come to me much more naturally. What I said turned out to be true, or relatively so. Of course, the more you do something, the better you're gonna be at repeating it over and over again, but the more you learn something, the more you catch flaws in your previous work, so I had to go back over and change some things up here and there. All in all, the formatting wasn't too intensive of a process for the rest of the time. I just simply followed the directions that I had looked up on the internet. But what became apparent to me in the next couple hours was really how hard it truly is to write not only natural dialogue, but comedic dialogue. Writing dialogue is really very difficult because in reality, people speak very incoherently. And if you write a character too properly, they come off as fake. On the other hand, you can make the mistake of writing a character so, I don't know, raw, so improper, that while it might be realistic for how people actually talk, it's not gonna translate well onto screen. Now I'm simply speaking from my experience of writing this one script for like 2 hours, but I've read scripts for other movies and that sort of stuff before, and you can tell, even in the finished draft of famous movie scripts, a lot of the dialogue is slightly altered by the actors because there's something just not quite right about it. It doesn't fit the character quite perfectly, and that's where the actor will step in. But if you look at poorly acted or produced movies, you can tell that that's where being a good actor or a good director that can point your actors in the right direction really comes in handy. There's a great example of this. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll probably concede that all of the writing done by George Lucas, while incredibly creative, things like the dialogue, it's very unnatural, very stilted. Now in the original trilogy, you had good actors like Harrison Ford and to a lesser degree Mark Hamill, but they and Steven Spielberg, they were kind of able to keep the dialogue a little bit more natural. However, once Star Wars took off and they started making the prequel trilogy, you had the same dialogue writing by George Lucas, but nobody on set really had the guts to say this is really dumb, nobody would ever say this. And that's where being a great actor really made all the difference. Qui-Gon Jinn's lines in The Phantom Menace, completely absurd, most of them. However, Liam Neeson is such a great actor, he was able to deliver them in a way that's convincing. The same goes for Ewan McGregor in Revenge of the Sith. His lines, they're very bad lines, but he was able to carry that performance. Hayden Christensen, not so much. Though I don't think that's really his fault, and I'm not gonna get into it. That was just a little example for the play between actor and dialogue writer. Anywho, it's about 4 o'clock, so I should probably get back to writing real quick. I'd like to finish this whole episode, which would be like a 20-minute episode today. I don't know, just a rough draft, but maybe. Finishing that writing would have been nice, but it did not happen. Because right away I ran into a problem. In those first couple pages, I had written down what I'd already had set in my mind, all my brainstorming sessions, all the funny dialogue that I might have written down in my phone. And at this point the story was set up, but I needed to create that arc. I needed to bring all of the collective bits of the show into a climax and then finally finish out the show in a way that it wouldn't affect any future shows in a very drastic manner. And after hours and hours of brainstorming and thinking and writing and writer's block, I decided it just wasn't gonna get finished today. So this is what I've got. I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of the script, which in my head I think will equate to maybe 7 or 8 minutes of like a 20-something minute show. Well, probably more like maybe at most 5 minutes. The more I look at this, the more I realize how little I've actually done in this time. But I'll tell you what, man, it takes a lot out of you. I never thought being creative and writing a script would ever be exhausting, but my brain, it's been working overtime, I'm starting to get a headache, and I think it's really definitely time to take a break. The most difficult aspect of writing this has definitely been the dialogue / the comedy. Comedy is really tough for a couple of reasons. For one, you might find something hilarious, but the chances are nobody else will. It's really easy to have a funny instance in your head and think of, somebody slipping on a banana peel. That would be funny. But maybe the thing that would make it even funnier is that it's a criminal escaped from jail and they're running from the policeman. Well, you need to make sure that you transfer all of that information onto the screen without being too brain-numbingly obvious about it. It's easy enough to write something with a funny concept, like maybe the Tooth Fairy is not like a little tiny fairy, but this huge football player guy played by Dwayne Johnson. Like, that's a funny idea, but it's almost too easy, and that's a family movie. That's not like a great example, but I feel like some of the jokes, even in a show like Friends, they're just a little bit too obvious. You can see them coming from a mile away. Now, a show like Seinfeld, or my favorite sitcom of all time, Cheers, they have jokes that you don't see coming from, you just don't, they're not there. They don't exist until they show up right in your face. It's that shock factor, that surprise of the joke that makes those shows so much incredibly funnier than a lot of the shows that are on TV nowadays. Granted, they're a different style of comedy, something like Friends or The Office or Parks and Recreation. They're more obvious forms of comedy, but I feel like the writing there is more focused on these funny characters that they've created and these absurd situations that they can get into, as opposed to the actual actual dialogue and a little bit more grounded nature of the comedy in, say, Cheers or Frasier. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I am baking under these lights and it's edit time and I've got a big internship interview tomorrow, so I definitely don't want to be up till 4 o'clock editing this one. That being said, peace. Like, subscribe. You might not really notice, but that and sharing the video and all that stuff, that actually does help me out quite a bit. Take care.